We've looked at every possible aspect of diabetes here in the EASD Live studio, but one that we haven't looked at is the evolutionary history of insulin. A fascinating subject, and I'm delighted to be joined by somebody who had a poster on it. And please introduce yourself.
I'm Milind Watwe from India. I'm a basic biologist and I study evolution. And in the context of diabetes, I have been studying evolution of diabetes and diabetes-like conditions in animals throughout the spectrum of vertebrates.
How fascinating. So, do other animals have diabetes?
Yes, there are diabetes-like conditions. Insulin resistance is certainly there. But unlike humans, it is not associated with, or it is not driven by obesity. So in humans, we believe, at least the current belief is that it is obesity to insulin resistance, then beta cell failure, then diabetes, and so on. It turns out that in animals, the pathway is more behavior to brain to neuroendocrine pathways and then peripheral effects.
So what animal typically gets that?
Okay, there have been good amount of data from primates. And primates normally, without any obesogenic intervention, do develop insulin resistance. Chimpanzees also develop diabetes in the wild. Okay, and in the wild, insulin resistance in chimpanzees, no doubt, is related to diet, but also related to social hierarchy, social ranking. Okay, and typically, low-ranking individuals are more insulin resistant. Although their dietary intake is lower, they are more insulin resistant. Now, this is related to being or not being aggressive. Okay, being strong and aggressive correlates with being insulin sensitive. Okay, and being an aggression avoider is related to insulin resistance.
So one imagines that if you were very aggressive, high levels of testosterone perhaps,
yes.
And is that the driving hormone?
It's not only testosterone alone. Okay, there are more than 70 different hormones and neuronal pathways which connect behavior to metabolic and endocrine systems. Okay, and I have listed these 70 pathways. We also made a network model of all these pathways together, and that network model also says that obesity is not the driver. The driver is behavior.
How interesting. And how might you apply that model to humans?
So now we have started looking at various aspects of this model to human, okay, although the picture is fragmentary. So what I presented here as a poster was actually the role of insulin in glucose regulation, okay, or re-examining the role of insulin in glucose regulation, because in the animal world, insulin has evolved not as a glucose regulator primarily, it is evolved as a fine-tuner of life history strategies and behavioral strategies. Okay. Even in humans, there are experiments that show that insulin intervention changes behavior. Then we have looked at behavior in certain games like ultimatum game of diabetics and non-diabetics. And the way diabetics make decision is substantially different from non-diabetics. Okay. And this has been driven by insulin. So there are experiments of insulin infusion while keeping glucose constant by infusion. And insulin-infused individuals behave differently or take decisions differently than the non-insulin-infused individuals. And these kinds of experiments are there both in rodents as well as in humans.
And what might that mean for future directions of research in diabetes in humans?
So essentially, diabetes is a complex thing which involves the brain, which involves your behavioral strategies. We call them which involves personality. So we call it a soldier or warrior personality versus a diplomat personality. And personality, of course, is a complex of several angles. And typically a warrior personality who is physically strong, and if there is a conflict, might go for a physically active solution. On the other hand, a diplomat personality will go for a socially manipulative solution for the same conflict. Right? Now, these kinds of personality differences are also associated with endocrine and metabolic differences.
And we've certainly seen Sir Michael Marmot's work of the civil servant study, the Whitehall study, where we've seen very great differences in health depending on how much control you have over your life. So that hierarchical system in relation to illness certainly exists in humans, and there's very well documented evidence of it.
Yes. So that seems to be consistent throughout the animal world. The relationship with behavior is more consistent than the relationship with fat.
Do you know, I'm going to end this interview here on that really fascinating and provocative statement, because I think it's such an interesting area. So there you are. We've thrown up something new for you to chew over in the hours when you're returning from the EASD. You can see that poster, and indeed all the posters, on easd.org. And thank you very much indeed for coming into our studio.
Thank you.